We should never allow the government to decide what is acceptable speech and what is unacceptable speech. We should penalize behaviors, not opinions, and not speech. If you start trying to regulate speech, you start trying to regulate thoughts, you start trying to regulate beliefs rather than behaviors, there's no way that you're not going to abridge the constitutional rights of millions of Americans.
This video is to overview the subject of how fair is the use of our United States Constitution. You have seen evidences the last couple of years where the communists who have taken over the Democratic Party have said consistently that any and every person in this country only has whatever rights they believe you should have. And you have instances where these college students are being expelled from school because of pranks. The prank itself isn't dangerous, it's just the fact that it's seen as being disrespectful towards blacks, like doing blackface. Students in Washington wearing a Trump hat being condemned for standing in front of an Indian who's pounding his drum. And they don't want people to see the whole story. In the instance of these students who were at a rally wearing Trump hats, well, that's the only part of it that the media would talk about. They would not show the fact that they were being taunted, they were being condemned and being subjected to racial slurs by blacks who were there as well. And the media refuses, in most instances, to bring up events where there's always two sides to a story, but they only want to bring one issue of it into focus when they discuss it, because they want to continually advocate for communism and socialism, which is to destroy individuality in America. And that's what they did in this instance with these kids. They were wanting to say that whites have no advantage, should not have the rights themselves to actually have freedom of speech, to have freedom of expression. These are things that are guaranteed under the Constitution. And it's not just for blacks. It isn't just for Latinos. It's not just for Muslims. It's supposed to be for everybody. And I hear these stories on television and I think, where is rationality from the media, from the public, to retaliate and say, you're not telling the whole story when you give a one-sided report on an issue where it's being distorted and twisted to make it sound like that those who are doing these things have no rights to do so, because the Constitution is supposed to be for the benefit of, in their assumptions, just certain people. The Democrats think that the Latinos, those who come here illegally, should have our constitutional rights to vote, to live here, to do everything and anything that a citizen has a right to do, because we are citizens. But they're saying you don't have those rights anymore as a citizen, because it's more fair to give those rights up for the good of those who are not here legally, who are not citizens of this country. And the media projects that viewpoint to society in everything they report now. They condemn President Trump because they believe that because the American public voted for him and the Democrats don't like him, that justifies that he should not be president. And that's what the media says every single time they talk about the status and the status of our nation. People made a mistake, and it's not going to stand. We're not going to allow it. And it's like, who are you to say what is and isn't legal? If America voted, and they have, and they've made their decision, there's no policy in our Constitution that says because you don't like it, you can have a temper tantrum and you can change the outcome of the election. You can't do that because you have no legal rights to do that. And anybody who thinks that they should have the legal right should be arrested, because you're violating the Constitution of the United States when you say to somebody who has that legal right to vote that they aren't entitled to have that right because you don't think they should. You don't think they are entitled to free choice, free freedom of speech to speak out and to say how they feel. And the overlying attitude in our society is there is no tolerance for anything. There's only intolerance, and that means that if you don't conform to the attitude of the Democratic Party, they automatically label you as a racist. Let me give you a little hint about history. When the Second World War began, the Nazis labeled each and every person who was of a certain nationality, like the Jews. They had this viewpoint of you're inferior, you're not entitled to anything, especially even humane treatment. You should not exist. And that's why they put a gold star on every Jew in those cities across Germany. And that was the way they identified who they saw and who they considered to be inferior. And when the military came in, the Nazi stormtroopers came in, they just systematically began taking people on the streets from their homes, and they shot them. Because this is how socialism works. Adolf Hitler knew if he used intimidation, hatred, that it would create even more sentiment towards this attitude of condemning the Jew as being anybody that they could represent in their cities and their towns as being valued or being important. So the Jews would be turned in a lot of times by the Germans. If they knew they were hiding somewhere, they'd turn them in and they'd have them arrested. And it's not to the level in America yet that that's becoming obvious. But you know that the more that people who express themselves being targeted and singled out as being hateful or racist, there's no proof of that happening when society condemns them for these things, because this is again a part of the philosophy of communism and socialism. You cannot speak for yourself as an individual, because the plan of what Obama started under communism and socialism is to subvert every American citizen's right of free speech and to destroy what is our constitutional rights, which is freedom of choice, freedom of expression, freedom of choice. You see that they're twisting it from the foundations of what our founding fathers wrote when they created the Constitution itself. It's supposed to be a guaranteed law of rule and liberty for people to all have the same rights to express themselves, and that's not true of whites particularly, because now we're the ones under attack by the blacks, by the gays, by what I call the hysterical retards, morons, who believe that what Obama wants for America is this global utopia where everybody in the world is seen as equal to each other. Well, that's not true if you have people being able to condemn others who have differences of opinion, and then they're taking the Constitution and throwing it in the wastebasket, saying, well, the Constitution doesn't protect you in that instance because, and then they just come up with any kind of an idiotic answer for why they're doing it to somebody else. My own opinion about the Constitution is, if you're not going to honor it, and if you're not going to uphold what it says about individual rights, then the Democratic Party should take it and burn it and throw it in the trash. Because if you're not going to honor what our founding fathers intended the Constitution to be, which was equal rights for the white, for the black, for every other race, for every other nationality, then it's not equal, period. Because you cannot have it just being equal for those groups that the Democratic Communists believe should have those rights. And it's laughable that a Democrat could even say to a citizen of the United States, your rights mean nothing if it affects somebody who's coming here and is not a legal citizen, who is not a citizen of this country, if it actually obstructs their rights, which they have none, to do whatever they want. The same is true of a citizen who chooses to express themselves through a parody or doing blackface, whatever. This is tantamount to saying that in our culture and our society now, the Constitution that's supposed to be the head of law and order in America is now Miranda. It doesn't represent what the Democrats want it to be anymore, and now the government is saying we're not tolerating anybody saying anything that's offensive to a black. I never heard that after the end of the Second World War, where the Jewish populations that were coming to America after the end of the Holocaust, I did not hear anybody saying that the word Jew was offensive to somebody of the Jewish race. There was all of this hatred that's built up now, and you don't see it being projected towards the people who have really suffered in the world, and that's the Jewish population. Millions of people died in those concentration camps. And it was actually the Iranian president, Ahmadinejad, who even denied that the Holocaust even happened. And now you see this attitude of hate that's being projected towards people who have viewpoints that the blacks don't agree with. So now they're using that same philosophy of saying that racism has no place in society as far as they're concerned. And now they're taking it to the next level, saying it's now a crime to even talk about it, to show it on a video, to talk about it in public. And folks, this is totalitarianism. This is communism. I mean, if you didn't go to school in America, you'll never know what it means, because only in America and in history books has it ever been explained to young people who were growing up 40 and 50 years ago that these are things that are in total contradiction to what America was founded on. That communism and socialism are viewpoints that subject and limit a person's rights. They limit your constitutional freedoms to say whatever you want to say. And now the Constitution is just being, basically, as I've said, it's being null and voided. And Obama did it for 8 years because he said, I'm going to just do it. I'm going to do whatever I want to because I'm president of the United States. And nobody responded or reacted to that. They did not say it was illegal. And now Trump is trying to do the same thing himself, but because the Democrats hate him, they justify saying, well, that's illegal. You can't do that. And it's like, why doesn't Trump come up and say to these people who are condemning him, you didn't do that to Obama. You didn't condemn him for what he was doing. And probably what you would get as an answer from the communists and the Democratic Socialists is this: we love him, and nothing he did, in our viewpoint, was ever illegal. So what, he gave billions of dollars to the Iranians? So what if they used it for terrorist organizations that exist even today in Iran? It doesn't matter about that. We don't even acknowledge that that even happened. But because we don't like Trump, we don't like who he is, we don't like this or that, whatever their excuse is, they use it as a reason to say it's not acceptable anymore in the Democratic viewpoint. And it's really gone beyond idiocy that people don't speak out about it and don't retaliate against it. You know, when you can sit by year after year and see the kinds of slander that they've committed against President Trump since he was inaugurated as president of this country, and see this attitude of indifference by Congress, who we've elected as President Obama was elected. But yet when Trump was elected by the same people, us, there's this hate against him. And it's that same viewpoint of hate that's flipped against groups that the blacks, the women of this country don't like. And so they use that same analogy against other people they don't approve of. And that's the idiocy of what communism and socialism promotes to people who are... essentially, you have a very much identical radicalism that's taking place in America. It is not Islamic hate that's promoting violence and killing. It is a radical viewpoint against a political party, a political viewpoint, which is, if you don't agree with communism and you don't agree with democratic socialism, you aren't just a racist. They are considering and tagging you just like they do the Jews, and saying that you are now a danger to society because you don't have the same opinion, the same view as those who really are, in every essence of the word evil, doing the very same things against your rights as an American citizen, to say you can't say that, you can't do that, you can't have that opinion, you can't have that attitude. The last day or so, there has been a blood wolf moon. And in the Bible, I know it's said in the past 2,000 years that in the end times, the sun would give up its light, the blood moons would be seen in our skies, and these are events that would take place according to the Bible before Jesus Christ returns, because you see an attitude of indifference to humanity to the level of no one counts but your dog or your cat or your bird. They have more rights, and they cannot speak. They might have brains to rationalize things with, but they are not paying taxes. They are not entities in our culture who have any direct involvement with how the system works, and yet they are seen as more important than a human being. And a human being, according to most millennials, we are nothing more than we're just a little higher in the evolutionary chain of life, as being, we're animal, but we're a little more complicated because we have rationale, we have a conscience, and then the issue of about us having souls. This is when the atheists come in, who were in control under Obama, saying that's not true. No human life, no human being has a soul. And then they'll use the rationale of saying there's no proof of it. I've done videos in the past showing there is proof. Doctors have measured and determined weight changes in a human body after they die, and it goes down between 5 and 7 pounds from that time that they die. And that, in my book, shows that there was a soul in that body, because it's not there now. And then people would laugh that off and say, oh, that's just hearsay, that's conjecture. And they've done those same tests on animals. Animals die, that's it. There is no weight change, there's nothing. That's proof positive in my book. Animals don't have souls, because God didn't say they had souls in the Bible. The Bible said God breathed into the nostrils of man the breath of life, and man became a living soul. It didn't say God breathed into the animal's nostrils of life and he became, or she became, a living soul. It didn't say that. And this is the idiocy of our culture today. We put value on animals, but we don't value human life anymore. Stem cell research is a joke. All you're doing is taking an unborn child who had no voice to speak for themselves, and they have snuffed out that life. And now we've gone to the level of barbarism, of cannibalism, tearing up their bodies, using every little bit and piece of their human body to do lab rat research. Instead of using an animal like a rat to do those kinds of experiments, now they're using human lives. Now they're using human body parts. And society says we're humane. It's barbaric, but it's inhuman. The level that America and the world itself has come to as human beings, that we value life only to the level that we're as important as a dog or a cat. Human life means nothing. And the Bible does say very clearly to the society that would live in the end times, woe unto those who are with child and who are nursing. Because the Bible says very clearly that human life will reach the level where it will not matter if you have a child or not. That child would become cannibalistic. It would be to the level where PETA itself has put human life at that level. Because they think a human being should be less valuable than animals that otherwise would become extinct in the wild, and because you use them in circuses, or you use them in zoos, or you try to preserve their lives by human captivity. And PETA has said over and over again, this is why they're destroying circuses and they're destroying other organizations that use animals. It's inhuman to do these things. And the attitude you see in these companies and these government agencies is that Satan is projecting into these minds of people high enough in government and in these organizations that we must live under the stipulation of Islam. Islam values nature above human beings. That's why Islam teaches that killing somebody is justified. It is a justified jihad, a caliph, to kill somebody else if you don't accept their religion. PETA accepts that same philosophy by saying that nature is more important than us trying to show compassion by capturing them and giving them lives where they otherwise would become extinct. They would die out. And the government today does the same thing with, they endorse and they encourage violence by certain groups. They endorse Islam because Obama said that for the whole time as president. We are not in a war against Islam. That means we will not retaliate or punish people who practice hate or violence if it is under the jihad stipulation of Islam, of Sharia law. There are courts in America today that practice Sharia law and honor it and recognize it as an actual legitimate way of life. They already do it in London, in England. And again, all of it goes back to the same philosophy. Communism and socialism is to control the masses of the populations of this world to accepting one overall universal viewpoint that a human life and a human being no longer matter. A human life and an individual now are whatever the government says you are. And that anything else that you promote is up to the government to decide if it's acceptable or not acceptable. And YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and all these other social platforms, which were designed to give every person the freedom of speech, they're now been manipulated and changed to say essentially what Obama said, which is, if we don't accept what you are saying, it's not tolerated, it's not acceptable anymore. And that's what communism at its foundation, that's what socialism and its foundational basis is all about. You are whatever they tell you are whatever they want you to be. No exceptions, no exemptions of whatever viewpoint you have. It's up to them as the government entity in whatever country you live in to decide if that's what they want you to be and how you should live your life. Now, they're on YouTube right now blocking videos that say or show activities that in their viewpoint could be considered dangerous, like skateboarding, snowboarding, any kind of a sport. They're going to isolate those that they don't consider to be not unsafe, and they're going to erase them off of the internet, and they're going to also block all the rest of them. That's the one point or start of what communism does. Socialism says this: you are on this earth to please us. You're here to accept our philosophies and our viewpoints, and that's what they do. And if you don't conform to it, then you're either ostracized and eliminated, told that you cannot say those things anymore, or they just eliminate you altogether. And that also goes down to the point of saying that if you don't think that communism and socialism cannot commit murder, cannot commit extermination, or what's called genocide, which is to eliminate people who don't conform to what the whole social system of globalism is about, you're wrong. Adolf Hitler did that to every Jew who was incarcerated and placed in every one of those concentration camps. He considered them inferior. He didn't even consider them valuable. The scientists who left Germany before Adolf Hitler took control, and one was Albert Einstein, he was a Jew. The only reason he was able to do what he did and his scientific genius was because he fled Germany before Adolf Hitler could get him. And that's the only reason we have his Einstein theory of relativity and all the rest of it, because they were smart enough to realize what was going to happen. And now we're at the next level of that kind of hatred against individuals. Not only in America, but all over the world. You've laughed off the FEMA camps. And you see this building up of hate against certain groups. Where do you think they're going to put all these people they don't agree with? They got to put them someplace. They're not going to just arrest them. They're saying, oh, the jail system is practically empty because Obama let all the drug dealers out. Yeah, he did, but there's still a lot of people in those prisons. There's only one place you can put people who overall don't conform to how the government looks at you, and that's to put you in a FEMA camp. Put you in a camp where you won't probably even be reorientated to how socialism and communism work. You'll be told you will accept and worship Obama and what he stands for, or they will exterminate you. And that is what the Bible already said would happen. In Revelation, it talks about how many millions of people would die for not taking the beast's mark, either on their forehead or on their hand. And it said that they were beheaded, they were executed, tortured, every kind of inhuman thing you can think of, and atrocity. That term doesn't really even mean anything anymore, atrocity. Because Obama has already shown that what he intends to do to this world, in comparison to what Adolf Hitler did to the Jews, Adolf Hitler is a choir boy compared to Obama. Because the Antichrist, according to the Bible, says that he will create such a tribulation, which is basically a worldwide epidemic of destruction, of terror, that it's not something America or the world's ever seen in human history. And I see it happening today in America. Every day it gets worse in this country, and you think America was supposed to be founded as the only bastion of hope, of freedom, of security in the world. And they have destroyed it from within itself. And they are the Democrats, because they still practice what Obama did for 8 years as president. That's why Obama's not out of the picture. You don't see him, but that doesn't mean that his influence and what he continues to do and bringing about his global government, his new world order, it's still very much alive. It's still very much controlling society that we live in today, because that's what the communist Democrats want. That's why they want to put somebody else in the White House as soon as they can, who can put the country back on track with where Obama had us going for 8 years. To advocate for homosexuality, to advocate every kind of immoral, unethical practice, as long, of course, as it doesn't offend blacks, as long as it doesn't offend women. In other words, traditionalism and everything we've understood about what and who we were as a nation is now, according to what Obama did for 8 years, it's been flushed, it's been torn up, it's been totally incinerated. And now today America believes that communism and socialism and what Obama endorsed for 8 years is what they want. That is what is more important in our culture today than to value human life, is to value those things that were considered abnormal, and now they're forcing society to accept they are normal. It's totally against nature, but they've been able to rationalize it in the lives of human beings in this world today, that homosexuality was just a evolutionary mistake, and that if two men want to live together or two women want to live together, it's perfectly legit, it's acceptable, and that's how they see it, that's how they view it. And I still will say, and I will still contest to the day, that it all becomes law, that homosexuals are the only acceptable lifestyle. If God intended for men to live that way, we would not have been given genders. If you want it on a flip end of the scale, animals are considered more important than humans. You do not see animals acting or living that way. You don't see two does with each other. You don't see two bucks with each other. It's unnatural for them to live that way, and they know it. They're the only ones that are smart enough to see that this is the way it was intended, because God created them like that, just as surely as He created us a certain way. And that's how He expects us to live. Unfortunately, you have Satan, the devil, any term you want to use for who he is, Lucifer. He's wanting to turn everything upside down. And so far he's done a good job, because everything is still flowing in that same direction. And until this country and until Jesus Christ returns to rescue the church, it'll keep getting worse, because God already said that in the Bible too. You know? The Bible said it over and over again. 2,000 years ago, he predicted all this stuff would happen. What does society do? You're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, great, don't believe it. One day you're going to wake up and it's going to be too late. And then you're going to say, why didn't I listen when I had the chance? Why didn't I read the Bible when I had the chance? It's too late then. God says in the Bible, when He raptures the church, people will be able to get saved, but you will not be saved from the tortures and the horrors of what the Antichrist is going to bring on this world for 7 years. And that is going to be a total nightmare. And you're never going to be able to wake up until after Jesus returns to fight the Antichrist. And that's also been predicted already and proven that it's going to happen, because the Bible said it's going to happen. The Bible also says there will be a nuclear war. North Korea just found out they've got more missile sites. They've got more portable mobile launchers. And people say, we got to blame Trump for that. Trump didn't do that. Obama, for 8 years, turned his head on what North Korea was doing. You remember the Interview movie? Kim Jong-un retaliated because they were saying exactly what he was doing, and he didn't want the world to find out what he was doing. And what did Obama do during that time? He said, well, we'll just fly a B-1 over Pyongyang, and that'll be satisfactory to everybody's happiness. They'll say, oh, well, we've shown our military might, and that's all he did. He didn't force Kim Jong-un to do nothing, because Obama didn't do anything to change anything about America for 8 years. He just let the blacks live at home on welfare, gave them a secret check every week, and he did that because he knew if I could get the blacks to vote for me and get me in office, he promised every black person in this country, you'll get a check from the government every week after I'm elected. That's hush-hush, because nobody ever found out about it. But I've heard about it from certain people I know. He did. And when he was reelected in 2012, he did the same thing again. He gave a black person every week a check because they put him back in office again. And now today, 2019, this hate, the bashing against Trump is because sane human beings in America said, we're fed up with communism, we're fed up with socialism, and we put Trump in there, and we got rid of the female version of Obama, and that was Hillary Clinton. And now the Democrats are saying, well, okay, we won't put Hillary up for the next election, we'll find somebody else. People don't want communism, folks. We don't want socialism. And that's what the Democrats are pushing. And that's all they're going to push, because that's what Obama tells them to do. Condemn normal, endorse abnormal, condemn right, endorse wrong, and that's what they've been doing. 11 years of communism, 11 years of totalitarianism under Obama should be proof enough to everybody. We don't want that lifestyle. We don't want degeneration or depravity in America. And the Democrats are saying the opposite. Yes, we do, because that's what Obama wanted. That's what Obama still wants to this day, and that's what they're gonna push on this nation. And folks, it has to stop. It has to end. The Democrats have got to be put in their place and be told, you are the swamp that Trump said he was going to get rid of. And the only reason he hasn't is because enough people in Congress, Republicans, have been bought out by the Democratic Party to look the other way. And that's why the shutdown continues after a month, because nobody blames the Democrats for nothing. They don't blame them for not coming to the table and trying to work out a deal. All the Democrats are saying is, we're going to force you as an American citizen to accept what Obama forced everybody to believe as being true. And we know now that it's a lie. And that's what the communists and the Democrats are saying. We're not going to let anybody say anything to the contrary. We're going to force America, we're going to force the world to accept Obama's New World Order. And that's how you're going to live. And if you don't stand against it, folks, you're as much guilty for not doing something as the communist Democrats who have been shoving it down our throats for 10 years, 11 years. Thank you.
Whose idea was this?
His name is Omran Daknesh, just 5 years old, and his feet barely hung over the edge of a seat in an ambulance. Dazed, he didn't cry as he wiped away blood and the dust of a building that collapsed around him in an airstrike. His silence somehow reminded the world today of its silence in the face of the atrocities in Aleppo. Omran was pulled out alive Wednesday. 5 other children died when the building they were in was hit during the relentless Syrian-Russian offensive on rebel-held areas in Aleppo. The image of Omran's face spread like wildfire on the internet. One tweet called him the real representative of the Syrian people.
Stop killing Syrian innocent people, civilian. Our children need to live in peace.
The doctor who treated Omran said today there were many more severe cases no one is paying attention to.
We need to protect our hospital, our doctors, our medical workers from airstrike.
Omran is recovering. His family now wants to escape. The same choice another boy's family made a year ago, Aylan Kurdi, whose body washed up on a beach. He too was a symbol of Syria's youngest victims. Now there's a new one. Tomorrow there may be another. Richard Engel, NBC News.
They've reported from around the world, challenged the powerful, and they bring all of this to every story that breaks.
We've got breaking news, and it's good news.
And touches your heart.
How do you even say thank you? Thank you is not big enough.
I made this.
The images shocked the world. Relentless bombings. Stunned survivors.
Hi, I'm William Bilbox. Hi, I'm Beatty. That's all. Apa